There's a lot of clinical applications of these performance-enhancing drugs and recreational drugs if you use them modestly under the supervision of a qualified physician. Most of us, though, we take them for our pure enjoyment or to attain a certain goal, right? So, Vigorous Steve here. Let's talk about vices, debauchery, and cravings. What you can kind of do to offset that so you can stay in the path to becoming a wholesome and accomplished individual. Most of the time, because I do think there's something to say for a little bit of debauchery here and there, taking some profit along the way when you've reached a certain milestone or you attained a particular goal that took months to prepare for. Some celebrations are meant to be in order. Some debauchery is going to take place, and it's usually accompanied with some sex, drugs, and rock and roll, or nowadays maybe EDM or hard techno, right? There's nothing wrong with it, but you don't have to do it too often. Where I see a lot of people go wrong nowadays, which is ultimately going to affect their testosterone levels and their overall health, is that they party way too hard, way too often. Maybe this video can give you some incentive to put a lid on it, and when you do feel debaucherous, you do it properly. Before we get into it, please like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by joining either the YouTube or Patreon memberships, where you can vote for upcoming deep dives, or join the weekly Vigorous Q&A, which is always on Saturday. In the last couple of Vigorous Q&As, a lot of questions about vices, debaucheries, and cravings started to come up. So here we are. Let's address it in a dedicated video. Now, when I talk about vices, debauchery, and cravings, I'm talking about performance-enhancing drugs, for example, steroids, growth hormone, Cialis, or recreational drugs, weeds, alcohol, GHB, LSD, MDMA, etc. I mean, there's so many recreational drugs out there. I've kind of closed off that phase of my life. And I'm also talking about sex, gambling, or foods, anything that basically detracts from your health and your overall state of well-being, albeit that someone can actually contribute to it in moderation, right? The key here is moderation. But if you need one of these medically, like testosterone replacement therapy, you'll see clinically on your blood work that your testosterone levels are below the reference range, or at the bottom, you go get your TRT or HRT script. And there's a good place for that if you live in the United States. Merrick Health, for example, they can get you healthy, write a prescription if required. They're the best TRT clinic and mental health optimization clinic you can find in the United States. Discount codes for blood work analysis down below. If you need testosterone medically, that's obviously not advised. And the same can be said for weed or kratom if you need this for pain relief, or MDMA or LSD occasionally at microdoses for overall mental health, right? There's a lot of clinical applications of these performance-enhancing drugs and recreational drugs if you use them modestly under the supervision of a qualified physician. Most of us, though, we take them for our pure enjoyment or to attain a certain goal, right? So sex and food, let's just start there. I mean, sex obviously is not a vice and debauchery and cravings if you're doing this with your partner. It doesn't matter how often you do it, unless it turns into a full-blown sex addiction where your partner is not really enjoying that. And otherwise, there's always one of these hands. But if you're a heavy lifter, these hands are kind of battered and bruised, and they will destroy your private parts. When it comes to food, obviously you need to eat and drink in order to stay alive. But there's a huge difference between nutritious foods that you prepare yourself for your overall fitness and health aspirations versus cheat food, processed food, stuff you get out of a wall or out of a package. Most of that stuff will detract from your health, gives you inflammatory conditions, gives you cardiovascular disease with prolonged exposure, makes you morbidly obese if you really overdo it. Still, there is something to say for a cheat meal, which you're enjoying with your partner. And even then, there's a huge difference between eating something nutritious on your cheat day or refeed day versus going ham on something that's processed, right? I don't think that a bucket of ice cream and a couple rolls of cookies is very, very nutritious. And you see that more often than not. People still restore some body fat when they do that once per week versus the people who eat nutritious foods for their refeed or cheat meal. I'm talking about sushi, for example, or even a gourmet hamburger, not the one you get from the fast food aisle, a gourmet hamburger that's prepared with love and appreciation and sanitation in mind at a real restaurant, a restaurant that also serves other dishes besides hamburgers, okay, like steaks, for example. Usually a steak restaurant is a good place to get a solid hamburger. Pizza here and there, depending on the topics, right? A 4-cheese pizza or a pizza with a lot of, processed stuff, not a good idea. So you have to choose something that's very nutritious for your body so you still get your micronutrients in for the amount of calories that are not going up for that single day of the week. Personally, I give myself the rule of 2 cheat meals on Sunday and 1 item that I would consider to be unhealthy. That's 1 item per week that isn't nutritious. So for the 6.5 days that I do eat nutritious foods, right? I cook all of my meals throughout the week, Monday to Sunday morning, right? Very, very boring, but at least I sustain my health this way. On Sunday afternoon and evening, when I have a lunch and dinner that's, quote unquote cheat meal, it's still healthy. It's still nutritious, albeit that the caloric intake is going to shoot up for me to restore a little bit of glycogen for the rest of the week. I still eat a little bit of fruit in there. I still eat, some healthy sourdough bread. Then 1 thing per week I eat off the menu. I don't really care, right? So I still have 1 opportunity to cheat hard and eat something very unhealthy, but it's not going to do anything to my health in the bigger picture, because the other 5 meals that I have over the week and the 3 meals that I have on Sunday, this little extra that's unhealthy, a drop in the bucket, it's not going to make a difference. When it comes to gambling, don't do it. It's that simple. Unless you have lots of disposable income. And even then, personally, my favorite way to gamble is by investing into stocks or cryptocurrency. That's calculated gambling. That's informed gambling. You have a lot of metrics that you can look into, whether those are macroeconomics or the current economic situation or news. You can trade whatever indicator you feel is appropriate, but it's still gambling. It's still gambling, right? So unless you want to go to Las Vegas and play the slot machines or, some of the card games or Russian roulette, for example, not Russian roulette or regular roulette. Russian roulette is also gambling, but you're gambling with your life. Right? There's different levels of gambling. I would say that investments are probably the best way to gamble because you can do so informed. And the other forms of gambling, that's you're kind of solely dependent on the rules of the game. And that brings us to the performance-enhancing drugs. That's basically what this entire YouTube channel is all about. I don't think that most performance-enhancing drugs, unless medically prescribed in your individual case, I think most performance-enhancing drugs, for the reasons of taking them for cosmetic purposes or to increase one's performance to beat other people in particular sports, whether that's for bodybuilding or other sports, right? I don't think it's healthy. Thus, you need to do your blood work every month or at least every 3 months and shove it under your nose to see what you're doing with your body. Do the organ imaging as well while you're at it, right? This is how you control the addiction that comes along with the use of performance-enhancing drugs. Don't see it any other way. I'm using this for my bodybuilding aspirations. I want to look a certain way. And this is not where these drugs were medically, designed for. They were designed to help people get healthy, right? Testosterone replacement therapy is there to make men healthy from a subclinical testosterone state. And besides that, none of us are really using these PEDs for their intended medical purposes. In order to enhance our appearance? Yes. In order to enhance our performance? Yes. In order to enhance our overall mental state and overall sense of well-being? Of course, right? But that also has a rate limiting return. At one point, the higher you go in particular dosages or particular drug combinations, you look worse, right? Everybody knows an off-season where you look like the Michelin Man. Horrible, right? But in the long run, of course, you develop your physique a lot more muscularly. When it comes to side effects, right? The higher the dose goes, the more side effects you can expect to experience, which is basically what this YouTube channel is all about. How to use performance-enhancing drugs safely with minimal negative effect on your health in the short term and in the long run. But don't kid yourself. You're always going to pay the price when you use PEDs. Health is going to be affected negatively, right? Just watch a couple other videos on this YouTube channel. Now,